Tonight on All In.
He initially was shocked. He decided we have to fight now.
New details on Donald Trump's surrender to justice, the processing and fingerprinting upon his arrival in New York as the ex-president and his allies rage.
It's duplicitous charging. They're trying to smear the guy.
Tonight, what we're learning about the actual charges Trump is facing, why his pending arrest means a return to normalcy and not a departure. My interview with a member of the exonerated Central Park Five on Donald Trump's date with justice and what all this means for the frontrunner's stranglehold on Republican politics.
When a public official is indicted, the office is more important than the person. They should step aside.
But All In starts right now. Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Donald Trump, the now indicted ex-president, is reportedly facing about 30 counts related to document fraud. Now, that is all we know at this point, of course, because Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg has kept the indictment sealed. We'll learn the full scope of what Trump is charged with when he is arraigned and that indictment becomes public. DA Bragg wanted that to happen today, but the arraignment was delayed. Trump's lawyer says the Secret Service asked for the delay, but sources tell NBC News that's not true, that agents are ready to bring Trump to New York at a moment's notice. Right now, the plan is for Trump to fly to New York City on Monday night. He will spend the night at the Trump Tower apartment, accompanied by dozens of agents, before surrendering to authorities on Tuesday morning. Assuming, of course, his lawyers are unsuccessful in their attempt to get the case dismissed. Right now, we are not anticipating a traditional perp walk like we saw when his former advisor, Steve Bannon, was indicted by the same office late last year. That's despite some reporting this month that Trump wanted to create a public spectacle. There's no expectation that, for instance, the ex-president will be handcuffed, like you see Steve Bannon there. He will be fingerprinted, and right now it's unclear if a mugshot will be taken. Efforts are underway to secure the area ahead of an expected arraignment. We know the courthouse will be secured with magnometers or the metal detectors, the same devices we now know Trump tried to get removed from his Ellipse rally on January 6th. And of course, this is, as you know, Donald Trump we're talking about. The indicted ex-president can be, well, a volatile man. He is not exactly known for either rational behavior or compliance. So suppose there's always a chance he just doesn't show up on Tuesday. Although we have no indication as of now that will be the case. Were he to decide to basically go scofflaw, to stay in Florida, his likely political rival, Republican Governor Ron DeSantis, who Trump recently smeared as a groomer, meaning that he was trying to groom underage children to have sex with them. That guy, Ron DeSantis, who Trump alleged was that, has said he will not assist in the ex-president's extradition, meaning we would likely see a protracted legal process then play out. Now, right now, reporting indicates that Alvin Bragg expects Trump to comply. However, obviously, they've been going back and forth. There's some arrangement that's been put together for Tuesday. For his part, again, as you would fully expect, the ex-president has been having a meltdown on social media. He's posted or shared dozens of examples of invective against everyone from District Attorney Bragg and Bragg's wife to Hunter Biden. He's even attacked the judge overseeing his case by name. That's not the first time he's done that, of course. Quote, "The judge assigned to my witch hunt case, a case that has never been charged before, hates me." By the way, let me just stop here. He doesn't know what the case is, so he can't know whether it's been charged before, just to be clear. His name is Juan Manuel Marchand, was handpicked by Bragg and the prosecutors as the same person who railroaded my 75-year-old former CFO, Alan Weisselberg. Trump actually spelled the judge's name wrong there. But Judge Marchand, who has worked in the New York legal system for decades, is, by all accounts, well respected by his peers, known for an even temperament. Weisselberg, Trump's CFO, of course, pleaded guilty, as Trump notes later in his post. Trump's allies certainly seem to share his rage over the ex-president potentially facing consequences for his actions. MAGA Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene says she will travel to New York on Tuesday to protest Trump's arraignment, pouring fuel on what is already certain to be a tense situation. And Fox News, which had spent the past few weeks slowly inching away from the ex-president, clearly trying to tip the scales towards Ron DeSantis, guess what? They're back. No more inching. They've inched back. They've ran back. Some of Fox's most prominent voices are also doing their best to wimp Trump's reporters into a frenzy.
This thing opens up a whole Pandora's box here, and I don't really think the left understands what they're getting themselves into. This country is already teetering. This, of all things to do, on a charge about this small that no other prosecutor is even considering bringing, really lights a fire under this country where we really don't need it.
I'm ready for whatever's next. And I hope every other man out there watching this show, I hope you're ready for whatever's next. If that's what they want, let's get to it.
We will find ourselves on that path to one party state in authoritarian government.
Yeah, probably not the best time to give up your AR-15. And I think most people know that.
Just to be clear, Tucker said probably not the best time to give up your AR-15s. Most people know that. Why not? Why is he saying that? The implication is that you have the AR-15 so that you could shoot at, kill, maim who? Fellow citizens? Agents of the state? Why do you have them? Who are you going to shoot? In Washington, Trump's buddies in the House are still demanding that DA Bragg essentially hand all of his evidence over to them. Today, Bragg's office was forced to respond yet again to their baseless demands, this time with a warning they are teetering on the edge of criminal conduct. Quote, "We urge you to refrain from these inflammatory accusations, withdraw your demand for information, and let the criminal justice process proceed without unlawful political interference." Jen Psaki is the former White House press secretary of President Biden, host of Inside with Jen Psaki, Sundays at noon here on MSNBC, and she joins me now. Let's start with that Bragg letter and that word unlawful, which seems chosen for a reason.
Yes. Purposeful, I would say. You know, I think, Chris, this is what they're requesting, which is documents, to be clear, in an ongoing criminal investigation is not something that any federal, local, or state prosecutor would provide. And it's also not the job of Congress. Last week, I had the former Attorney General Eric Holder on the show, and I asked him point blank, do they have the ability to do this? And he said, basically, absolutely not. I mean, and that is the consensus of most legal experts out there, but they continue to request it. And that's what's sort of stunning. But that was a strongly worded, firm letter from Bragg's office and shows that, you know, he's got a stiff spine and so does his team.
There's a lemming-like quality to Republican reaction here that is not surprising because, I've been doing this for 7 years.
Nothing surprises you probably at this point.
Well, also, I mean, this is how it goes. I get it. But that said, it's still striking how sort of down the line everyone is and all the same rhetoric and all about, you know, they haven't seen the indictment. No one just saying, you could even take the tack of like, this is a nonsense charge and he's going to beat it. Who cares? Right? There are ways that you could do this that isn't like we are getting excited about the thought of civil war, which is what has been being communicated to folks who are watching right-wing media or listening to Republican politicians.
Yeah. I mean, what I was so struck by over the last couple of days, I mean, and I wrote some of these down, right? Trump, it's attack on our country, an attack on our free and fair elections. DeSantis, weaponization of the legal system, which is one of the phrases they've been using over and over again. Weaponization of the legal system. I mean, to me, I heard a lot of this, Chris, as projection of exactly what they are doing, right? They are attacking the district attorney, a member of the judicial system, of the justice system, the judicial process, and asking him for documents in a criminal investigation, which, by the way, there's a reason there's a separation between the judicial system and Congress. And so it's a projection. And to me, that reminds me so much of what you see from people like Vladimir Putin. Do you remember at the beginning of the war and many times over, he was saying Ukraine has nuclear weapons. Ukraine is committing genocide. That's what authoritarian dictators do. And that is what we are seeing here from Trump on down. But you're right. They're lemmings and they're following. They put out statements so quickly last night. It's like they were prepared in advance. Maybe they were. And they were just kind of blindly following, even without any details about the indictment.
Yeah, and again, I think, who knows? I can't see into their hearts, and some of this is, I think probably some of it is genuine. They think he's being railroaded or whatever. Some of it's political calculation. But it's just, it's turning the dial to 11 all the time immediately on everything, is I think not a great call. I also think, just to talk about Tuesday, you got Marjorie Taylor Greene saying she's going to go down there on Tuesday, which, fine, whatever. You worked at a White House. You've been around logistics. The thing I keep just obsessing over, and maybe this is a weird place to take this conversation, is just being the person who's in charge of logistics for Tuesday. Lower Manhattan, the ex-president, Secret Service, NYPD, the court, the protesters, the people that want to go heckle Donald Trump, the media scrum. It's just... It's almost a mind-breaking set of logistical challenges to conceive of plotting out. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and there's been all sorts of reporting, right, about how they've been preparing for it, and the New York Police Department, and obviously even within the federal government, when you have threats like these that have been posed, the hundreds of threats that Alvin Bragg has received, you even have the Department of Homeland Security people tracking that, and I'm sure briefing as needed people in the White House. But yes, the logistics of this, I mean, I don't know if you're suggesting how is Marjorie Taylor Greene going to get close. That is a good question. That just popped into my mind because I don't know how she's getting through all the barricades. But yeah, there's a circus aspect to it, no question. And that's probably what they want to minimize too, right? Is the circus, crazy, dangerous circus aspect of this if they can. If I'm not mistaken, obviously the predecessor to Alvin Bragg was Cy Vance, who occupied that office as a Manhattan district attorney for a while. You have an interview with him coming up this weekend. Is that right? I'm looking forward to that. That's right. Yes, on Sunday. We have him on Sunday. And, he was the predecessor, as you noted, as the former Manhattan district attorney. Right before Alvin Bragg, there was a great deal of investigating exactly these cases before he gave up his office, and he didn't run for re-election. So he has some significant insights there, and also some insights into kind of what we should all be watching at this point in time. So I'm looking forward to asking him about all of that. What don't we know about the work that happened in his office? A lot of it, obviously, he couldn't talk about at the time, and certainly couldn't talk about before there was indictment. So lots of questions to dig into with him on Sunday. One more question or sort of point I wanted just to discuss with you is it does seem to me, all this stuff about the country's teetering and, it's sort of noticeable to me that, Trump had the big death and destruction and calling people into the streets. Mm-hmm. And it didn't happen. That the sort of counter to this, which is the White House's counter, is we're going to let the system play out. And this is part of the normal system, that the way for Democrats and progressives and folks, in the sort of broad anti-Trump majority of the country, wherever they are, to diffuse or rebut that rhetoric is by sort of lowering the temperature ultimately. That's right. And there's a range of reasons to do that. One, it's morally the thing you should do. You should allow the system to play out. But even if you're thinking about the politics, Chris, what the White House is doing, and most Democrats, I think the statements by Leader Schumer and former Speaker Pelosi are right in line with this as well, is keeping it just above the fray and essentially defending the process, which is defending democracy, which, by the way, is how the Democrats held on to the Senate. Yep. It's also how the Democrats came close to holding on to the House, which is defending the values that our country was founded on and not diving into the chaos. So, it's right morally, but it is also, it turns out, good politics. And hopefully it stays, as you said, not crazy, insane, chaotic, given Trump and others' calls. Yeah, I don't think this is that difficult or complicated for folks messaging-wise. Thank you, Jen Psaki. Really appreciate it. Thank you. And as I mentioned, you should be sure to tune into Inside with Jen Psaki this Sunday, where former Manhattan DA Cy Vance will join at 12 p.m. Eastern. Coming up, Donald Trump may be the first former president to be indicted, but is it really new territory for the U.S.? Well, a Trump indictment could be the thing to get America back on track. Next.
Hey, everybody, it's Joe Scarborough. Exciting news. You can now stream Morning Joe live on Peacock. You're going to find us in their new Morning News Live feature every weekday from 6 to 10 a.m. Eastern. Head to peacocktv.com/Morning Joe for more information. See you there.
Hey, everybody, it's Savannah Guthrie.
And I'm Hoda Kotb, and we've got some great news to share.
The Today Show is now available wherever you get your podcasts.
Can you believe that? Right now, you can get your daily dose of news and headlines and the day's top interviews from us right here every single morning.
We have what you need to start your day, and it's available every day, wherever you get your podcasts.
So why not subscribe and follow today to start listening?
There's been a lot of commentary in just these last 24 hours about just how unprecedented these events are. That America is taking a step into the unknown, the abyss, by prosecuting an ex-president. Peter Baker, the chief White House correspondent for the New York Times, wrote, "For more than 2 centuries, presidents have been held on a pedestal, even the ones swathed in scandal, declared immune from prosecution while in office, and effectively even afterward. No longer. That taboo has been broken." And it is true. These events have no precedent in the history of our country. It's an enormous, enormous deal that's happening now. I don't want to undersell this. But there's something about that framing, which is not just Peter Baker's, it's widely shared, that I find a little alarming and misleading. This idea that this is the moment that we jumped off the map into the abyss. That moment actually happened when that guy, Donald Trump, was elected president of the United States. That guy, Donald Trump, president, a man who clearly had a history of lawlessness and demagoguery, a guy who just, to pick one thing at random in his campaign, issued a call to ban more than 1 billion people from entering this country purely based on their faith alone. One of the most flatly offensive assaults on American values I've ever seen. When that guy won, that is when we jumped off the cliff. That is when we left the map and went into the darkness, the uncharted territory. And remember, that win was an incredibly narrow, fluky victory. 78,000 votes out of over 100 million across 3 states go the other way, and there would have been no Trump presidency. He lost the national popular vote by nearly more than 1 million votes. And not only that, that narrow, fluky victory was helped along, but not one, but 2 different criminal conspiracies. One, quite famously, involved a hostile foreign government, Russia, which stole a trove of emails from the Hillary Clinton campaign and then leaked them to benefit Trump. Did some other stuff as well, but that was really, really the big main event. That was one of the criminal conspiracies that helped elect Donald Trump. The other criminal conspiracy to help elect Donald Trump was to make hush money payments to women Trump had affairs with, an adult film actress and a Playboy model, in violation of campaign finance law. Michael Cohen, then a loyal attorney and fixer for Trump, ended up pleading guilty in that criminal conspiracy and served prison time for it. In his plea in court, Cohen confirmed he performed these illegal acts at the direction and for the benefit of a person referred to in the documents as Individual 1. He later identified that person as Donald Trump in open court before Congress. So that was part of what helped Donald Trump win his fluky victory in 2016, get in the White House to begin with. Now he actually faces criminal charges in that very same case, though they're local charges, not federal ones. Just so the notion we are making some crazy departure from reality or from the past, or at least from like what is acceptable, what is taboo, it doesn't square with the fact that accountability for public figures and public officials is routine in just about every other public office. Probably not as routine as it should be. Let me just take an example. It's a state near and dear to my heart. The great state of Illinois. I lived and was a reporter in Chicago for years. A decade ago, you might remember this, Democratic Governor Rod Blagojevich was convicted in Illinois on corruption charges, and he was incarcerated. And get this, at the time of his conviction, Blagojevich was the 4th of the state's previous 7 governors to be sent to prison. Like, if you were governor of Illinois, it was more likely than not you would go to prison. Those were the odds. So that shows legal accountability for chief executives in government can happen. It can span decades, and it can happen again and again and again. And heads of state around the world have been tried and convicted according to commonly held laws. The former president of South Korea, an advanced, developed democracy, imprisoned after being convicted of bribery and other charges just a few years ago. In 2021, former French President Nicolas Sarkozy was convicted in one trial of trying to bribe a judge and in a second trial for, wait for it, violating campaign finance laws. Not to mention, as we watch all of this, oh my gosh, what will happen? Hand-wringing. It's not like America has a problem putting people in prison or charging people for crimes. For years, we've had the highest incarceration rate in the world. It's gone down a little bit. Even now, we're still up there, incarcerating a higher percentage of our population than places like China or Russia. The vast, vast majority of those people, our fellow Americans that we put in prison, do not have the resources or the status or the fame or the platform or the power that one Donald Trump has. No, what happens to them is they get led into central booking and they get arraigned and maybe they go to Rikers or their local jail and God knows what happens to them there. And then most of them end up pleading out. And many times, let me tell you something, if you've worked around the courts, they plead out even if they're kind of flimsy cases. Happens every day in this country. Get this, in all of 2021, the last full year we have data for, just 1% of felonies in New York City went to trial. And guess what? I'm going to rock your mind again here. Sometimes in this country of ours, people end up going to jail for things under questionable legal theories or circumstances. But here's the thing. The one thing we can be sure of here is that Donald Trump is not going to be in that situation. Donald Trump is not going to be railroaded. He's not going to have some lawyer cajole him into a plea while they've got 90 other cases. He will have the best lawyers he can find and pay for, along with the resources and the weight of all his accrued status and power. This whole thing of if they could do it to Donald Trump, they could do it to you is exactly inverted. No, the nation already does it to you. It already does it to everyday citizens. Can the nation actually hold to account in a fair and reasonable manner with due process the highest ranking former official? That's really what it comes down to. The whole idea behind this country, need I remind you, is what? That we threw off the tyranny of a king. And what is a king? A king is a special kind of person who sits above the law and above his subjects and is immune from the law in key ways because he is the law. That's it, the distilled essence of the core principle of monarchy. The law and the man are the same. Nearly 250 years ago, we rejected that in favor of a nation of laws to which everyone is subject. There is no greater test of that principle than this moment we find ourselves in right now. And people are freaked out about it. Again, I get that. But it's deeply weird to me to be an American, particularly a patriotic American, and be unwilling to face this test. Because it is a test that we must be able to pass.
Hi, I'm Tom Yamas, and for me, the news is so much more than a headline. It informs, it inspires, and it still matters. To cover it, you have to be in it. We'll take you to the front lines of the story, where it's actually happening, with NBC News journalists on the ground from all over the world. We cover what you need to know and bring your newsfeed to life. In primetime and streaming live, it's your news playlist. Join me for Top Story, weeknights at 7 Eastern on NBC News Now.
There comes a point when a singular event shapes our future, broadens our perspective, and marks a crossroad in our cultural landscape. The Turning Point, an original documentary series from MSNBC Films and executive producer Trevor Noah that explores these watershed moments for the biggest issues of our time and asks how we got here and where we go next. The Turning Point documentary series on MSNBC and streaming on Peacock.
Now the grand jury has voted to indict Donald Trump. We start to see more reporting on what could actually be in the charges. There are lots of big questions about what happens going forward. Elie Mystal is the justice correspondent for The Nation. Katie Phang, of course, served as a prosecutor in the state attorney's office in Florida's Miami-Dade County. Of course, she's the host of her own show on MSNBC. Harry Sandick is a former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, now a white-collar criminal defense attorney with expertise in financial fraud. Let me start with you on that.
Yes.
I saw someone say this who was a ex-prosecutor from this office who said these kinds of charges on falsifying business records specifically said for this DA's office, it's like what mail fraud is for the feds. Like when they're going after someone along these lines, like that's the bread and butter charge you get in this office on this sort of thing.
I think that's right. And they don't have wire fraud and mail fraud. So if they want to bring white collar charges.
In this district, you don't have that law.
That's right. New York State does not have the same types of laws that you have in the federal system. So they have to look to other types of statutes, larceny in some cases, and in this case, the false business records prosecution is a way of achieving the same purposes.
In terms of the normalcy of this prosecution, which is like sort of the big question, right? Yeah. We can't, again, we all we know is there's 30 counts. We don't have the thing in front of us, so we can't judge it. What are you looking for when it's unsealed for a gauge of the legitimacy of this as a set of charges?
I think as a kind of fundamental concept straight out of the gate, the misdemeanor falsification of business records, I think nobody could dispute that, because I think across the board, even Trump would have to concede it wasn't booked properly in the Trump organization at a minimum.
I think that's probably correct, that he did not book that properly.
We're all going to be looking at what is that second charge that elevates it to a felony. Reporting is that it is a felony. So what is it? Is it tax fraud, tax evasion? Is it a campaign finance violation? Why? Because the next step in the process after Trump is arraigned on Tuesday is the torrent of motions to dismiss. We've already seen one that's happening in Fulton County, for example, to dismiss and make sure that the special grand jury report doesn't come out. We know that Trump's lawyers, albeit not all of them, are competent enough to be able to file something to challenge the legitimacy of these charges. But Elie and I were going back and forth in the green room before we started this, and I would like to use the following analogy. I will maintain that rule of law is, even if it was a misdemeanor, although we've heard it's a felony, it's still a valid prosecution because rule of law says no one is above the law. But kind of like a rocket has a booster. This could be the booster for the big rocket that's coming for Donald Trump. That would be then the Jack Smith special counsel prosecution and the Fulton County stuff. And maybe the booster drops off eventually because Elie thinks it's not going to get there. But I do think that this is where we get started.
Well, yeah, and we should just note that those are conceptually and legally distinct.
Absolutely.
You're just saying in a sort of broad sense of the news.
Sense,
right, okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You are skeptical of the timeline here, above all else, I think.
The thing that I would love to see in the indictment is that this was in 2021 as opposed to 2023. Right. As Katie just said, the issue here is what's going to bank it from a misdemeanor into a felony. We talked about campaign finance frauds. The statute of limitations on campaign finance fraud is 5 years. He committed the campaign finance fraud, most likely, in 2016. That gets us to 2021. The tax evasion fraud. Tax evasion statute of limitations is 3 years. Right. We became aware of the tax evasion in 2018 when Michael Cohen went to jail. 3 years from 2018 gets us to 2021. Right. Somebody has to tell me why this hasn't happened in 2021. Now, Alvin Bragg is going to have some theories for why the statute should have told, but they're all, and I think Katie was talking towards this point, Trump is going to have appeals. He's going to have motions. He's going to have a strong legal argument. To your point, though, Chris, the issue about the normalcy, it's not just all the legal stuff he's going to do. It's the racism he's going to do about the judge. It's the threats of violence that he's going to do with his supporters. This is going to be not normal, not just
going to do. He already started.
Yeah, right. This is going to be like Roger Stone on steroids level of throwing stuff against the wall.
So I want to actually get to that, which is, he targeted the judge in a post today.
Yep.
And is that generally, do judges like that? I don't know. I don't practice law. Do judges like that or not like that?
In a word, no, they don't like it. And this judge isn't going to like it either. And although he may be somewhat careful to not restrict political speech, given that it's a politician who's been charged, I think he is going to make it very clear that comments about the case are not going to be allowed. And I think he is going to have to, enforce that rule over the course of this case.
I think the tipping point is going to be when Donald Trump goes after the grand jurors, because we both know that that is where he's going to go next, if not already going there already. 23 citizens of New York City doing their duty. He's going to put them in the crosshairs.
There's also a dynamic here that when you look at the classified documents case, right? If he just complied, there would be no case. If he had just been like, I didn't realize. We'll give him to you all the. He's like, if he keeps talking about the judge, And the judge says, stop doing that. And then he violates gag orders. Like, there's a dynamic process here, to Elie, to your point about, like, what Trump does, what Trump's lawyers do, what the people around Trump do, what the, House Judiciary Committee does. It adds an uncertainty that's not present in other cases.
It's one of the ways the Republican Party writ large, not just Trump, obviously, but DeSantis, Youngkin, all of these, Republican would-be presidential candidates. It's one of the ways that they show how they're still fundamentally terrified of Donald Trump because they are repeating his lines. Yeah. They are doing his thing as opposed to what they could do, which is say, let the process play out.
That's right.
Because Trump could win this process. People forget John Edwards was voted for the man. John Edwards was charged with a very similar crime by the feds, not the state, which is a different issue.
Right.
But he was charged with a very similar crime, and he got off.
Yeah.
He beat the rap.
Yeah. Yes.
Trump can beat this case if he handles it in an appropriate manner. And if I'm a Republican governor, that's what I would say.
Exactly. And it's so striking that's been totally absent because it is hanging there to be like, we think this is ludicrous and he's going to beat it.
And there are legal defenses here. We've talked about some of them already. Statute of limitations, as you just mentioned, is a possible argument. There's an issue that if you commit this crime, you have to do it with intent to defraud. Right. Who was he defrauding? It was a private entry in a private corporation. Right. He wasn't defrauding anyone, he will argue.
He was defrauding America is what he was doing.
But whether that's enough is going to be litigated in this case.
But I would push back. I'll do it to you respectfully.
Sure.
I don't really know you that well, but Elie, I was like throwing out in the green room. You don't think Alvin Bragg reasonably anticipates these legal defenses?
Sure. Right. I think he does.
I mean, he has to.
He's an excellent prosecutor.
Exactly. And so
but prosecutors don't sometimes lose cases. I mean, that's the point. I mean, to me, that's the point of this whole thing, right? Is like, again, like what it means to be, one nation under laws. It's like, right, he's going to go and he's going to have more resources and a better shot at beating this than 99.99999% of people that walk through that courtroom that looked every day in one of the most incarcerated nations in the world.
And this is why I want to open up the spigot on him, though, right? Because I think the other point here is that I have lived under the yoke of this man with his ridiculously day after day after day after day, just shoving it down our throats, right?
Speak for yourself, man. I work in cable news. I don't know what you're talking about.
Now I want indictment after indictment after indictment. Fannie Willis, Jack Smith, all of them, indict them all at the same time. Just come after him from every angle, so that now he's the one under the spigot of a lot of news stories. That's what needs to happen.
I feel that way just on the merits of, as I've said many times on the show, on the merits of what he did on January 6th and the gravity of that crime and the need for the system to actually hold him to criminal account for what he did there. I feel that strongly, independent of, the emotional catharsis that might provide. But the other thing here, just about the timing here, I mean, I did a whole Illinois riff there. If I'm not mistaken, I forget who it is, Madigan, I think, who is the notorious Democratic state Senate leader for years, sort of ran the state Senate, right? He was indicted. I think it's been 3 years and he hasn't faced trial. Well, the timeline for these cases are long.
The reason why I said it's the booster. This is the one that gets us started. And the next thing you know is it's the Jack Smith, the Fulton County. It's going to take some time if we're going to have to litigate the intricacies of if you can use the campaign finance violation as your kicker to get you to the felony.
And remember, the Supreme Court is going to slow walk all of it.
Yeah. And New York State Court, excellent judges. Very overburdened judges. Yeah. There are so many cases in that courthouse, and the judge who has this case, this will be one of many.
Eastern District in New York, federal court, Eastern District, which is in Brooklyn today, secured a conviction of a pro-Trump troll who was trying to get people to text their vote for Hillary Clinton in 2016, 7 years later. Wheels of justice move very slowly. Elie Mystal, Phang, Harry Sandick, thank you all. Coming up, in the words of the one and only Miss Taylor Swift, sweet like justice, karma is a queen. More on what's coming back around for Donald J. Trump ahead. There is so much more to get to tonight as the news continues to break around the indictment of the 45th president. We'll get right back to that shortly. But first, I want to call attention to something many of you may have already noticed tonight. Down at the bottom of your screen. It's there. See it? There. You can see we've adjusted the show's logo just a tad to add the number 10. And that is because tomorrow, April 1st, marks the official, get this, 10-year anniversary of this little cable news show we call All In. It's a milestone we are incredibly proud of, can't quite believe. It's the longest running 8 p.m. show ever on MSNBC, and I'm excited to keep going. We're going to be celebrating this august moment all next week, but I'm also very curious about the soundbite that my staff is asking me to throw to now. I have not seen this. We don't usually do this on air. I don't know what it is, so I will watch it with you. Roll tape.
Chris Hayes is the kindest, bravest, warmest, most wonderful human being I've ever known in my life. See, this is a problem, right? Because that sounds totally creepy. It sounds creepy. It sounds like it's a script from the Manchurian Candidate, but it's all true. This is a problem. I love you so much as a colleague. I sound like I have been brainwashed by the North Koreans to say so. Chris, congratulations on 10 brilliant, smart, uncompromising, funny, humble, erudite, excellent years in primetime. See, there I go again. I'd sound like a total creep. I like you enough that I cannot express it honestly without sounding like a creep.
Oh, man, that's really fantastic. Right back at you, Rachel Maddow, who I'll see in a few moments. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Probably seen a lot of newspaper covers today. This is the cover of the New York Times. Trump indicted there, huge, above the fold, full column. 50 years ago was when Donald Trump made his first appearance in the pages of that same paper, the New York Times. It was also on the front page. And that was when the Justice Department accused Trump, his father, and their real estate company of racial discrimination against black people in apartment rentals. That's the first time Donald Trump's name appears in the New York Times. Over the course of the intervening 50 years, he has been sued and accused of unlawful behavior in just about almost every possible way, including violating the rules for Atlantic City casinos, almost getting his license revoked. But at the same time that he has been skirting laws and facing only civil consequences and often not even facing those, there's a loud and prominent voice for the most aggressive kind of quote unquote law and order policing in New York City. Most sensationally, when he took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for New York State to bring back the death penalty in the case of 5 accused black and Latino teenagers called the Central Park Five. 5 people who were later, quite famously, exonerated of the crime that they've been convicted of. One of them, Yusef Salaam, responded to the news of Trump's indictment yesterday with a one-word statement: karma. Yusef Salaam joins me now. He is the author of Better Not Bitter, Living on Purpose in Pursuit of Racial Justice. He's a 2023 candidate for New York City Council. Also joining us is our very own Reverend Al Sharpton, host of MSNBC's Politics Nation. Great to have you gentlemen here.
Thank you.
Mr. Salaam, that tweet blew up for understandable reasons. What was going through your head? What did you think when you saw the news about Trump's indictment?
You know, I got to tell you, I was looking for this quote by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., because I thought it was so appropriate how he mentioned that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Back in 1989, we're talking about almost 34 years ago, you know, the spike wheels of justice ran over us. And much of it was predicated by what Donald Trump did by taking out that full-page ad. That ad was written, I should say it was placed in the papers 2 weeks after we were accused. We weren't given the presumption of innocence. They looked at the color of our skin and judged us by it and not the content of our character. And the challenge in that is having to live through that all of those decades. Even still now, we still have those indelible scars. The beautiful thing about it is that we get an opportunity to almost have all of the experience that we have gone through be something that we've grown through in order to be able to show up today.
How long were you incarcerated?
7 years. Close to 7 years.
Rev, I mean, you are a New York City fixture, and Donald Trump has been a New York City fixture, and the two of you have
quite different fixture.
It's a big category fixture. Right. You know, one of the things that struck me today is thinking about this is, if Donald Trump had never gotten into politics, he'd never been elected president. If we were sitting here in 2023 and there was a headline that said Donald Trump charged by Manhattan DA for business fraud, it wouldn't be like super shocking. No one would say, oh, no, that Donald Trump, there's no way. His reputation for skirting the law in New York has been notorious for literally decades.
No doubt about it. But I think that what was so alarming to me is that the few of us activists, Yusef and I was just talking about, that stood up for the Central Park Five. One of the Five's mother came to me, and I believed her. She said, my son didn't do it. They coerced him into confessions. He did 13 years, Corey Weiss. And I think that people, when they look at Yusef now as eloquent as he is, they forget they were young boys, suffered. They went to jail. Can you imagine being in jail, knowing you didn't do what you're in jail for, and someone calling for your death?
One of the lines that folks in conservative right-wing media and Fox and other places have been saying to their viewers, looking in the camera, and they say, if they could do this to Donald Trump, they could do this to you.
Wow.
Right? The idea is like, and I'm just curious how, given your experience, how that hits your ears to hear folks say, if they could do it to Donald Trump, they could do it to you.
You know, justice has always eluded black and brown people, even to this day. You know, I sit on the board of the Innocence Project, and one of the most interesting things that I see is that DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, has helped free over hundreds of people. And yet, when we were found...
Serious crimes.
I mean, it's very serious crimes. One person was in there for 40 plus years. When we were found innocent 13 years after. And Donald Trump went on to say they had to be guilty of something. And I think that was the sentiment in America, that negative stain that is still here, that thing that plagues us in the justice system, that thing where we're constantly saying, where is the justice for us?
After that ad, so I want to just make clear for the folks who have not followed this, he's never apologized. He's never said, I got this wrong and I'm sorry, and I shouldn't have put that ad.
No, he doubled
down.
He doubled down. He said that the city should not settle with them. They shouldn't do anything.
Because they have to be guilty of something.
And the thing that was striking to me is, Yusef is very spiritual, as I am as a minister. Tuesday, when he's arraigned, is the 55th anniversary of the assassination of Dr. King.
My God.
And here is Yusef Salaam quoting Dr. King. And I think many of us in the movement believed what Dr. King believed, and that is you will reap what you sow. And on King's assassination day, I was talking to Dr. King's son, Martin Luther King III, he will be arraigned. And Yusef and the other four will see him walk in the building they were arraigned in many years later.
I know you have a relationship with Alvin Bragg. He is one of a number of prosecutors around the country who ran as reformers, right? And you see this Soros-backed tag. And it's true, Soros has given money to the campaigns of many of these reform candidates. It's been an explicit goal of the reform movement, right, to elect reform prosecutors. What do you, knowing what you know about him, I know you had him as an interview, how he's going to navigate this?
I think that he has more stability and courage than people realize. And I think that his temperament is even. We had a prayer for him, a big prayer at our Saturday rallies we do at National Action Network last Saturday, because we're concerned about his family. He's getting droves of threats.
The security
and but he's been stable. He's a stable family man. He's a Sunday school teacher. But I don't think he would proceed if he didn't know the evidence was there. Let's not forget, a year ago, he would not go with the case. So only someone that is methodical as Alvin Bragg would even proceed. If I was Donald Trump, I would not relax, because he would not proceed if he didn't feel that they had this really well done.
I don't know the content of the case. Obviously, it's not been unsealed, but you have to think that that is the case, given the stakes here, Dr. Yusef Salaam and Reverend Al Sharpton.
Happy 10th anniversary.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That means a lot to me. Thank you very much. That does it for All In. You can catch us every weeknight at 8 o'clock on MSNBC. Don't forget to like us on Facebook. That's facebook.com/allinwithchris.
The battle over a woman's right to choose, global economic challenges, the ongoing threat to democracy. When you sign up for the MSNBC Daily Newsletter, you're signing up to have a deeper understanding of today's biggest issues. Every morning you'll get insightful articles sent directly to your inbox, written by people you know and trust, like Hayes Brown and Mehdi Hassan, along with video highlights from your favorite MSNBC shows. Sign up for MSNBC Daily at msnbc.com.